What is going on, guys? Matt Downs with Daily Grind Fantasy Sports to help teach you how to use our NBA Optimizer. Our NBA Optimizer will allow you to have the flexibility to choose whatever types of lineups you want using whatever preferred settings you desire. First, I'm going to give you a brief overview of our Optimizer. On the left side indicates the positions of each player. To the right of that is the lock button. If you want to lock in a single player, just hit the lock button. If you want to unlock players, just simply hit the unlock button. Same thing for exclude. If you want to exclude a player from the player pool, hit the exclude button. Obviously, next to that is the name of the player, status, position, team, opponent, time, salary, the ownership, the projected ownership of the player, the industry average projections, and then our custom projections. Here, you'll be able to compare our custom projections over the industry averages and help identify the sharp plays. For instance, on the right, you can see that Giannis is projected more for us in the captain spot than the industry average. This would be a sharp play in GPPs. Same thing for Kevin Durant. Looks like this is going to be a top-heavy slate. If we keep scrolling down, you'll see that Bruce Brown we are underweight on, opposed to the industry. This might be a sharp fade, but the decision's up to you. Now to head over to the pro options. If you're creating multiple lineups, these settings are very useful for you. The first setting is auto max exposure. By setting this, a certain player should not appear in your lineups over this percent of time. For instance, if I set this to 10%, that means that no player should appear in your lineup more than 10% of the time. Obviously, that's a little crazy. I would never do that, but you get the point. The next category is auto min exposure. The exact same rule applies here, except it's the minimum exposure. Now for the fun stuff. Auto team stacking bonus. Players from the same team naturally rise due to the high correlation of their performances. So setting a team stacking bonus is always recommended. Once set, you can actually choose the exact stack percentage bonus. I'd say 20 is a good starting point. This feature ensures you have high upside if certain players go to overtime, or the game is just naturally high scoring. Now for another cool feature. This is called Auto Ownership Bonus. We know in tournaments it's good to diversify yourself a little bit, and it's also good to leverage yourself against the field. With this tool, you'll be able to easily identify leverage spots. Once turning Auto Ownership Bonus on, you can turn on a correlated ownership bonus percentage. For instance, if I change this to 20%, this means high owned players will more likely appear in my lineup and are given a 20% boost to ensure that my lineup is good for small GPPs. The ownership percentage threshold sets the maximum ownership of a certain player that's allowed to be used in your lineup. For instance, if I set this to 50%, not a single player in my lineup will be over 50% owned. Using the combination of the ownership bonus percentage and ownership percentage threshold allows you to get different and big GPPs very easily, while also correlating your stacks. The next is the auto diversity bonus. Diversity bonus adds a fantasy point bonus to players that are not in any other of the generated lineups. For instance, if two players are close in projected fantasy point value and one hasn't been used in any of the other generated lineups, it will be used in the lineup that's currently being generated. Diversity helps increase the odds of not missing out on certain players that might significantly exceed their projected performance. Think of this as a randomness factor. If setting this to 20%, this will diversify your next projected lineup by 20%. Minimum fantasy point value allows you to have a minimum fantasy put input, and no player under that fantasy point production will appear in your lineups. Minimum difference between lineups is very similar to diversity bonus percentage. However, this is taking on an actual value instead of a percentage. For instance, this next lineup generated, if you're crunching multiple lineups, will differentiate yourself in one single spot. Exclude game time decision. All you're doing is clicking on to exclude players that are game time decisions. Exclude out, the exact same thing, except excluding players that are out. Include teams, you are including and excluding certain teams that you want on the slate. And hit save to save your settings. Now when generating all your lineups, they should all appear utilizing your pro features. We are just scratching the surface with all the pro features that we want added to this optimizer. We will continue to improve our product and make sure that we always have the edge. For more DGF 2.0 tutorials, please click on the playlist named DGF 2.0 tutorials.